Welcome to Resilient by Design, Casey. I am so excited to have you here and talk about this really intriguing, important, and impactful topic. Welcome.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
I'm before we dive into all the things, I'm so excited. I have a million questions for you. Can you just share with my audience, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a life and sobriety coach, and I help busy women stop drinking for a period of time or completely so they can drink less and live more. I host a podcast. It's called the Hello Someday podcast for sober, curious women. And a lot of women have gotten into the habit of drinking. It's what they do to relax at the end of the day. It's what they do on girls' nights and with their partners. Alcohol is everywhere. And it's a new mindset through habit and behavior change is what I do in terms of how to look at your relationship with alcohol and stop drinking for a period of time without any labels, without any pressure, and with a lot of hand-holding tips and tricks on how to do it.
I love it. And we connected through a membership that we are a part of. And I heard you talk on this subject. And actually, you were talking about podcasting, but I just loved the topic of what you podcast about and what you teach about. And I'm like, this is for me, this is for my audience, because we are hardworking, high achieving women listening today who probably are interested in this topic. And if you're not, then you don't have to listen. But I feel like most designers that I know and most women that I know, especially the mothers, um, I don't want to say everyone drinks in excess, but alcohol is a part of our culture. Alcohol is a part of
Yeah.
our society. It's a part of being social.
And it's also in terms of listening to this, studies have shown that over 1/3 of American adults are interested or trying to drink less. And that is something that we don't always talk about. So I am thinking that a lot of women listening to this, even if they're not ready to stop drinking, might be taking a new look at how they feel in the morning, how they're sleeping, if alcohol is serving them, and trying to cut back.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's been my story, and we can get into that in a little bit because I have wavered back and forth. Like, I would say that my identity is certainly in my 20s and in my 30s was that I'm a drinker. Like,
Mhm.
I like to drink and proud of it.
Yes.
And I'm sure you can relate to this, but this idea of oh, I don't want to hang out with them. Like, oh my God, they don't drink. That's so boring. Like, I was that judgy person. And I don't know where that comes from. I guess that came from society, from university and binge drinking and really our friend circle. The people
Mhm.
that we would be attracted to hang out with were the people let's have let's have a lot of wine. And the alcohol is your form of entertainment,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like, how do you have fun? How do you have a social conversation? How do you feel comfortable without this thing? And that is where I started to realize, as a young parent, definitely drinking too much. Then probably now in hindsight, I realized I was not sleeping well. My kids would have me up. Plus, I would be having several drinks
Yeah.
every night to
Mhm.
kind of quote unquote unwind and thinking okay, this is maybe not so healthy, but I don't even know, shamefully, how do you even exist without this in your social world? It's one thing to say, okay, I don't need it when I'm alone. Although I feel like that's when I enjoy it the most. I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
It's like,
Oh, yes.
it's my moment.
Well, every single thing you're saying is resonating with me. I was also a big drinker, and it was a huge part of my identity to the point when people would ask me, like, tell me about yourself in some version or another. I would describe myself as a red wine girl, sort of in the same vein of, I live in Seattle, I'm married, I have 2 kids, I'm a red wine girl, I work in marketing. Like,
Wow.
it was right there. And I was terrified of stopping drinking because I was like, what do you do if you don't drink? Do you just sit around and stare at each other on Tuesday nights? Like, I couldn't, which is, looking back, hysterical. But you also mentioned that all your friends drink, and that is so common. Most people who drink Their partner probably drinks. It's how they connect. It's what they do on every anniversary and date night. Their friends probably all drink. And that was definitely true for me.
Why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think so many, you probably know the research better too than I would even dream of, but like, why are so many people in society drinkers?
Yeah, it is not by accident. So the alcohol industry has been very fine tuned in terms of how they are targeting different populations to make them believe that alcohol helps them relax, helps them connect, helps them sleep, also helps them be more sophisticated. It's what adults do. Food and wine pairing, it is completely a marketing construct that champagne is the drink for weddings and New Year's Eve. It is not complete without it. And red wine pairs with steak, and white wine is best for fish. That is all marketing. And I spent 20 years in brand marketing, and I know the number of focus groups and testing that goes into how to appeal to different segments. So there are influencers who are paid hundreds and thousands of dollars by alcohol companies to post incredibly relatable social media things about alcohol. And oh my God, the kids are going back to school. Here's, the drink of choice. And it's powerful. So way back in, the 1980s, the alcohol companies saw that their market that was primarily targeted to men needed to shift. And there was what they call the pinking of alcohol marketing. If you look around, there are literally bottles of wine that are called Mommy's Timeout. And that's really taken over. And once we believe that, it's like a circular firing squad, right? It's like you take a picture of your cocktail on a date night, if you're a mom often, or a picture of everybody's cocktail and post it on social media as a signifier that this is your time off, that this is you as a mom going out to have an adult night. And it's also within working women. It's positioned as empowering, that there are articles written about what you drink and what it means about you. So if you fall into the trap of drinking a lot, it is absolutely not your fault. It is by design. And also, alcohol is addictive. And I think that's something people don't talk about at all. Literally, this substance is designed to make you drink more and more often.
Yeah, it's funny. I hear people say that all the time, and I've been known to say that. Like, I'm not addicted. I could stop anytime. But then,
And
do you?
yeah,
But do you? But do you?
when I don't think that a lot of people will say that, right? I'm not addicted. And that you don't need to be addicted at all to decide
Mm.
to take a break from alcohol or decide to cut back. I think that's something that a lot of people stops them from taking a look at their alcohol consumption. I know I personally, I wouldn't have called myself physically addicted to alcohol. I was absolutely emotionally and habitually addicted to it, meaning
Mm.
I wanted it. I thought it helped me. I loved drinking, right? That is an emotional connection. And I did definitely drink too much, and it didn't start that way. It started with a glass or two at dinner. And by the time I stopped, I was 40 years old. I was a director at a Fortune 500 company. I had two little kids, and I was drinking a bottle of wine a night unless I was trying to not drink. And I was sort of white knuckling it. And nobody said anything to me about it. It was not that unusual to drink 4 glasses or a bottle of wine a night on a night out. But what I was doing was a glass of wine before dinner, 2 glasses at the restaurant, and then 2 or 3 more when I came home on a Saturday night.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. I mean, I 100,000% have been there. Um, and I do vacillate, and it's so It's just such a mind fuck.
Yes, it
Pardon
is.
my French.
It is
Do you
a
know what I mean? Like,
huge,
it's
huge
so
mind
you're
fuck.
right. It's not necessarily like a physical I mean, there's part of a physical need to for some people, but there's also it's in the mind. It's so much in your mind, and I don't know.
Yes.
I just that's
And
been my big like
one of the things I love, and you don't realize it, is when you get further away from drinking, all that noise in your head literally goes away.
mhm.
And the other thing I would say is you don't have to be physically addicted to it in order to feel like you really want to drink, or that you're less happy when you're not drinking, or that you're a nicer person or more relaxed or more fun when you drink. And that is because even if you drink once a week or only at the weekends or whatever it is, you're in physical withdrawal from alcohol. You are more irritated, you're less happy. And that is actually, and you're more anxious. Like, people think that alcohol helps relax you. It is actually like pouring gasoline on anxiety. And that's because of what happens in your body. Alcohol spikes your dopamine really high, which is your happy hormone. So your body naturally suppresses it because it wants to maintain balance. So when you are not drinking, your dopamine level, you are less happy than you would be. It also spikes your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, really high. And you
Mhm.
mentioned sleep, and this was a stat that blew my mind. Having a single glass of wine or one beer decreases your sleep quality by 24%. And if you have anything like two glasses, it decreases it by 40%. And yet we think it helps us sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Oh my gosh. It's funny. So like I first for a long time I had that noise like you said there's that noise in your head, right? There's the
Mhm.
I'm not going to I would wake up in the middle of the night I'm like, "Oh, I've got hot legs, like the
Oh
heat's
my
on,
God.
turn the heat down," right? Like too much wine and waking up in the morning feeling shame. And I
Mhm.
realize now that's what the word to describe it. Like, oh my God, why did I do that? Like, I've got a big day today. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, tonight I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
But then 4 o'clock, that's a lot of hours. And you're 5 o'clock and you get home and you're thinking, oh, I'm just gonna have one.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the shame is even worse. And this noise in your head that is an internal conversation that is affecting, at least for me, and I can only speak to my own experience, affecting. And so for the longest time, I was very curious. Like I love this term sober curious. And I want to talk
Mhm.
about the origins of that with you, but this idea of like, what does it look like? And I think actually, to be honest with you, I was listening to a podcast back in like 2017. I think it was Rachel Hollis was talking about alcohol and the power it has over you. And it really, at the time I was like, oh, I never really, oh, wow, it was the first person I'd heard talk about it. And it like, there wasn't a stigma, like alcohol does these things, like it's not good and it's affected me. And here's my story. And I was like, oh, and I did a 75-day challenge where I didn't drink and I exercised every day. And it was summer, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is so crazy. Why would you pick summer? What a terrible time to not drink, right?" And
Mhm.
I'm like, I just have to show myself that I can do this.
Yes.
And it was day 75, and I remember being up at the cottage and thinking, I feel the best I felt and I don't even know how long. And I was a young, like new, not young mom,
Yeah.
new mom. Like my youngest was probably, I don't know, under a year
Mhm.
old. And, but I felt like, well, I did it. I guess I'll have a drink to celebrate. Like, where does that even come from? I'm like, I'll just
Yes.
have a drink now. And then I'm not going to like obviously fall back in. Well, guess what happened? I fell right back into my daily drinking habit until, then the next year I'm like, I'm going to take a break in January. And January is a great time to do it. And that lasted 4 months.
Mhm.
But then
Yeah.
it was summer. Oh, let's celebrate. I've gone so long. Well, it's somebody's wedding or it's this, and I'll have a drink. And then last year I did it again. I did for 5 months from January till
Good
May.
for
I did not have a
you.
drip.
That's amazing.
And Casey, I felt amazing.
Yeah.
And it was like freedom in your brain. If you could even describe it, like I wasn't driving home at the end of the day thinking, oh, I can't wait to have that glass of wine or I
Yeah.
can't wait to open that Corona.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
and yet, there's an event, there's a social event that then is like a tipping point where all of a sudden I'm, oh, well, I'll just have it. I'll just have the one. I'll join you guys. I'll celebrate. And then slowly but surely you fall back off the wagon, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so common. And I would say when you don't drink for a period of time, you do feel better. And that is incredible. I mean, you sleep better, you're happier, which I mentioned, you're less anxious because of what's happening in your body. You are also building what I call sober muscles, but you are breaking a lot of limiting beliefs you have. Like, I can't do a Saturday night without alcohol. I can't go on vacation without alcohol. It will be no fun, or go out to dinner. And you realize that it often, yes, you know, are thinking that a drink is paired with going out to a restaurant. So you feel a little bit sad in the beginning, but you order, for me, a non-alcoholic mojito, you order non-alcoholic beer and wine, sparkling wine and rosé, and they even have non-alcoholic spirits, are
Mm-hmm.
amazing. If you go to pretty much any restaurant, they have a zero proof cocktail menu these days. My favorite beer, Athletic Brewing Company, is literally at so many restaurants and bars now. It's at the professional baseball games, even dive bars. And you are not drinking O'Doul's, which is, by the way, crap, non-alcoholic beer, in my opinion.
There are
There
so many options
there
now.
is good stuff out there. And once you do it, you say, oh my gosh, I can remember the conversation. I felt
Yes.
proud of myself driving home. There was no, I'm probably okay. You sleep well. You can get up the next morning and go for a run. I used to, have 10 a.m. yoga classes on Saturday and Sunday I'd sign up for. And then at 9:30, I'd be like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, I don't feel great. And you just realize that your life is full. And,
Mm-hmm.
I used to think, oh my gosh, this New Year's Eve won't be as fun without drinking. When I look back at those nights, realistically, I don't remember some of those nights I thought would be incredibly fun.
Mm-hmm. I find too, like, into your 40s, into your late 30s, 40s, obviously your body doesn't process it the same way,
Yeah.
right? We're not spring
Yeah.
chickens anymore. And what is interesting is that you're right. I feel like you get to a point where you keep drinking because where's that buzz? I want to get that buzz. I want to have that fun. Like, remember in my 20s when you like have a few drinks, you're like, oh, and it just doesn't come. Like, it doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
then you're not getting really that tipsy. And then you
Mhm.
just feel like crap the next day. And the irritability is the big thing that I notice because as someone with young children, man, they can be noisy, they can be obnoxious, they can be irritating. It is 10 times worse when you've been having a few drinks the day before. You're on edge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And you, like I said, really physically are on edge. It's not your imagination. I found, I thought that drinking was making me a happier mom. And also you can multitask. What I found was, I mean, all of your listeners, right, are entrepreneurs. They're busy. They may be mothers, they may not be. But once I stopped drinking, I realized the degree it was affecting every single part of my life, physically and mentally, and my relationships. But not only that, I think one of the reasons it's easy to do it is we don't have a lot of time for ourselves. And you can, quote unquote, multitask when you're drinking, right? I could come home from the office or a long day and have a couple of drinks while cooking dinner, while playing Legos, while doing Candyland. I mean, I would end my day, get the kids down, and have to jump back on my computer to finish a project or send emails. You can drink while doing that. And it sort of psychologically says, oh, well, I still am doing something for myself,
Mm.
because you can't go to yoga if you have little kids, necessarily,
Yeah.
certainly not
Yeah.
all the
No,
time,
it's
but
so
you can
true.
have wine or beer.
So true. And that comes back to what you talk about, which is like mommy time, like
Mhm.
the mommy wine, the t-shirts, the swag, right?
Yeah,
It's like
and
mommy's
we
doing
do
this for
it
herself.
to each other, meaning we've all bought it, and of course we have. I mean, I was conditioned since birth that, wine is what you have with dinner. My parents, they are not big drinkers, but there was a bottle of wine open every night at dinner. My grandparents had a cocktail every night. And again, not big drinkers. I was definitely and still am the only person in my family who was like, ooh, I have no off switch. But I was conditioned that, it was good, it was sophisticated, it is what you do. And that was just reinforced by when I went to college. By the way, that is changing, and that is amazing.
Mm,
Gen Z and millennials are drinking significantly less than their parents and grandparents did at the exact same age. And the biggest drinkers now are Gen X, which I am, and baby boomers. I mean, by far the biggest drinkers. And again, that's societal.
that is so interesting because I do think and I worry for my kids. Like they're 9 and 6,
Mm.
at the time of recording, they're still so little. And I think, oh gosh, I worry about them going
I
off the
didn't
deep
even
end.
believe the stats. I really didn't, but there's so much research on it now. 30% of college students don't drink. That is incredible to me. When
Mm,
I was drinking, I was like, if I met one person who didn't drink, I was like, what is going on? But
totally.
there is this whole sober curious movement. There's a whole movement about mindful drinking. And I actually think two things are happening. One, the data and research, which had been suppressed, literally not researched because of the alcohol industry and their money, is coming out that zero amount of alcohol is quote unquote healthy or recommended because it is not good for your heart. It, does not help you in any way. It actually, and, people don't want to hear this, and that's okay. We all do things that's not good for us. It causes cancer, 7 different
I, w-
kinds of cancer.
I
And
was just going to
even,
say
yeah,
that is like something that why are people are still denying it.
yeah. And
I don't
the American
understand.
Cancer Society just changed their recommendations in 2020 to acknowledge that alcohol causes cancer. This research was available way before then. Part of it is nobody wants to hear that their drug of choice
Right.
isn't healthy for them, quote unquote, in moderation. But even 3 glasses of wine a week, and again, zero judgment, I was a bottle of wine a night drinker, raises your risk of breast cancer by 15%. Every glass over that raises your risk of breast cancer, specifically, this is the research, by an additional 10%. 85% of breast cancer cases are not, there is no genetic um, implication or causation. So kids know that.
Mm-hmm.
Kids know it causes anxiety because people are talking about it. And
Yeah.
also, I think, everybody talks about the negative aspects of social media and sort of being on camera all the time and people being able to record you has actually been a big influence in younger people not wanting to get drunk. Shockingly, they don't think
Mm,
getting
it's
drunk and
cool.
binge drinking is that attractive, which, is
Yeah,
hysterical
that's like the
as a
opposite
Gen
of
Xer who
what.
was like, I'm a
Yeah,
good time. This is awesome. That night was epic.
totally. Oh my God, remember when we did those shots and yada yada yada?
Totally.
Yeah,
And also
like
when you
bragging
get
rights.
older, like doing shots as I'm 48, a 48-year-old woman and starting to slur. And I, occasionally would like be on my knees throwing up. I quit when I was 40. That's not actually that attractive, you know?
Totally. It's funny. My son came home from school, I don't know, a few months ago, and he said, Mommy, alcohol causes cancer, right? Because
No,
I
he
guess in health
didn't.
class, they were
No,
talking
he
about it.
didn't. Isn't that
And I
incredible?
said, You're right, buddy. And he said, So why do you drink it? And honestly, it caught me off guard. And I said, I think I don't know. I was drinking at that time, and I don't remember what I said to him. But I went to my husband afterwards. I'm like, this is what he said. And my husband's like, well, what are they teaching these kids? I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
they're teaching them the freaking truth. Come
Science.
on, like wake up. And I think it's so interesting that this is happening, in our lifetime, because there's so many parallels that I see to the tobacco industry,
Oh, yes.
into cigarettes. And I remember a few years ago, back when I was just initially sober curious, saying to my husband, I think alcohol is going to be like cigarettes. I think
Yeah.
one day future generations are going to look back and be like, what a disgusting habit. Why would someone basically drink poison?
Hmm.
And he's
Yeah.
like, no, I don't think so. And like,
Well,
it's literally every year is becoming more and more popular to pull back from drinking, quit drinking. Look at all of the, I was just at an event at the bank in Toronto where they had an entrepreneurial women's event. And one of the speakers is a CEO of this massive alcohol free brand. I think it's called Groovy.
oh my
And
God,
they
I
make,
love Groovy. It's one of my
yeah, she was amazing. She was the co-founder. Anika, I think is her name. And I went to her breakout session and she's like, their business is freaking killing it.
Yeah.
There's
It is the
demand.
only portion of the alcohol industry which is growing. And the alcohol industry, of course, like truly hates the sober curious movement. I am, because I research this all the time, I get a lot of articles within the wine industry talking about, oh no, people are talking about the link to cancer, and this is going to affect your profit. So this is what to do about it. But they're also having to come out with zero proof or non-alcoholic options. Guinness has a non-alcoholic beer. Corona has a non-alcoholic beer. Heineken, of course. They're not doing this because they think it's great, because, by the way, 95% of their products are alcoholic. They're doing it because the demand is there and they have to.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not cheap either. It's not like it's it's I went out for dinner with my husband last week. And I just didn't feel like drinking that night. And I didn't drink all week. I was so proud of myself. I'm like, Rebecca,
Yeah.
you went 5 months and you can't even go 4 days.
Yeah.
And and they're like, oh, we have mocktails. I'm like, oh, sure, bring me the menu. And I like open up the menu and I'm looking and I'm thinking, I am not feeling like paying $12 for this cocktail that doesn't have alcohol. I'm like, I don't feel like I need that hit
Yeah.
enough. I'm like, I will have sparkling water. I will be just fine.
Which
So, I
is
mean,
totally great. Yeah.
which is great, but it is great that these are there's it's and of course there's like a mixologist and he's making them and there's a craftsmanship to it, which I think is actually lovely and wonderful
Oh my
because it's
gosh,
still
you in
an
dry
event.
January, there are going to be restaurants that are pushing their zero proof um, cocktails and drinks specifically for people doing dry January. Somewhere
Totally.
between 1 out of 5 and 1 out of 3 American adults participate in dry January. So if you decide to take a break, number one, you are not alone. Number two, it will be in the media. Last year, Vogue and Self and the New York Times and the and NPR and Women's Health, everybody did articles and coverage of the sober curious movement, of dry January, what to drink instead. And it is like tobacco. One of the reasons I do this work, other than I needed this information when I was worried about drinking or wanting to stop, because there was very little out there 8 years ago. But 70% of Americans know or believe that alcohol causes or tobacco causes cancer, which honestly, I can't believe there's 30% of people who aren't aware of that. But only 30% of Americans know or believe that alcohol causes cancer. And drinking a bottle of wine, which, by the way, again, zero judgment. I did it every night. I loved it. I pushed it. But drinking a bottle of wine is the equivalent cancer risk of smoking 10 cigarettes.
What? Whoa. Can we just stop there for a second? One bottle of wine has the same risk of causing cancer as 10 cigarettes.
Yes. And can you imagine sitting around your
Ugh.
kids smoking? I think one of the reasons tobacco went that way is because of the risk to other people, because of secondhand smoke. I think that's
Right.
one of the reasons that the push happened. But one of the least reported or acknowledged aspects of alcohol is it is the most harmful substance in society, more than heroin. more than cocaine, more than meth,
Mm.
because it is so common. And it, the year after pandemic, the number of women who died of alcohol related causes grew by 20%, 25%. Year over year before that, it was 2 to 3%. So this substance is actually causing a lot of harm. And again, not trying to, if you love to drink, great. My husband still drinks, and I do this work. He has a beer or two a night. I actually had my daughter on my podcast. She is 9. And we did an entire episode about talking to your kids about alcohol. And we actually talked about, like, what do you think about the fact that dad drinks and mom is a sober coach and quit drinking? And, she's like, it's poison, it's bad for your body, it causes XYZ. And then she's also like, yeah, but dad can drink, and, he has 1 or 2, and that's fine. It's a personal choice.
Yeah, yeah. And well, and that's what I think is the whole idea behind this movement is it's judgment free, right? And that's what I'm hearing. There's no judgment on how much you drink, if you choose to or if you choose not to. Do you think that this sober curious movement came out of the pandemic? It's no
No,
secret people were
it
drinking a
actually was
lot.
around before that. So the term, the sober curious, people were sober curious before 2018. Dry January has been a movement
Mm.
for a decade. It came out of the UK, but Ruby Warrington is an author, and she wrote a book called Sober Curious, which was published in December 2018. And it was after that point that the term itself took off. And I think it was incredibly catchy. She has since gone completely alcohol free, but at the time she wrote the book, she was not. She was going back and forth very similarly to what you described. And I think that once people take a break from alcohol, this is why I love Dry January and Sober October, because you're almost like, oh, should I be taking a break? Like, is that what the cool kids are doing these days as a, New Year's resolution? But it allowed people to talk about it. And when they take a break, you can't unknow that you feel physically better, and that a lot of the things that you were worried about are not in fact true. And you're not going to know that until you experiment.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a fun thing to do with friends, to be honest. I've done it with friends. We're like, "Hey, let's all do." I mean, that you can do every month of the year has its own little catchy
Oh,
name,
it
but like,
totally does. So we're
right?
September.
Like there was something in November, but let's do dry. If you want to do dry January with me, and it's like having an accountability partner too, which is kind of neat because sometimes it's hard. It's easy to say one thing, but then you get home at the end of the day and you're like, well, I'm just gonna have one. I know I said I'd do
Yeah.
dry January. So, what are your tips for people who are super curious and are kind of intrigued by this idea, or who are like me that are more than curious, like very much
Want to
appreciative
take a
of
break. Yeah.
who want to take a break, who potentially want to leave it behind.
Yes.
But what are your tips for people who want to take that first step?
Yeah. One thing that I think is really important is to not think about forever, not think about it ever, never again. Think
Yes.
about this with excitement and curiosity. What would I do with my extra time? What habits might I take up if I felt great on Saturday morning? Um, like for me, it was, I always said I was going to do all these things. I always said I was going to run a 10K. I never did. I never, took up a guitar again. It's hard to play guitar at night if you have a glass of wine in your hand all the time. Um, you know, Experiment with that. And when you take a break from alcohol, it is a time where you truly should invest, not in doing a big diet, because that is a mistake a lot of women make, but instead in really doing extreme self-care. Take the money that you would have spent on alcohol. If you're a mom, get a babysitter. Go get a massage on Friday night, get sushi takeout, buy an essential oil diffuser, join a gym that has a steam room and a hot tub. I mean, my first month not drinking, which is crazy, I saved $550. not drinking. That is a lot of money for massages and pedicures. And the reason you
Mhm.
need that is we think of alcohol as our reward. We're all busy, we're all overwhelmed, we all don't have enough time for ourselves. So, what you will need to do is create other rewards that truly bring you joy and care for your body. And you actually need to, I suggest to my clients, like, map out your sober treats. On your first week, you need one every day. And it can be going to a coffee shop and reading a magazine by yourself. It can be, listening to a podcast and taking a walk. But on Fridays, on Saturdays, and on Sundays, in the beginning, you absolutely need something that you are looking forward to that is just for yourself and is not laundry and driving the kids to a million sports games.
Yeah.
So you need that. The other thing, the reason not to combine it with a big diet, first of all, you will feel better and you will look better, even if you're eating more. You just will. Alcohol is terrible for your looks. Your eyes will look better. Your skin will look brighter. You will be less bloated, even if you eat more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But physically, hunger, low blood sugar is a huge trigger to drink. So I suggest definitely eating a snack with protein around 4 p.m., 3:30. So you are not going into dinner time when you normally drink hungry. I set
Mm.
an alarm. I tell my clients to set an alarm to literally have a protein snack at 3:30 or 4. And also, keep the ritual of pouring a special drink at happy hour, change the ingredients. One more reason not to diet is you're going to crave sugar in the very beginning. You just are.
Yes, that's a big thing I noticed.
And
And I'm
let
like,
the
I don't even have
judgment
a
go.
sweet tooth,
Yes, I never
but it's
thought I
because
had a
there's so much
sweet
sugar and
tooth.
alcohol.
Yeah, I was consuming all my sugar and alcohol and was somehow very superior about the fact that I didn't, oh, I don't need ice cream. I don't crave it. I could have ice cream in my fridge for a month. I would never look at it. I was consuming so much sugar and alcohol. The other thing to know is, yes, you're going to crave sugar because alcohol has a lot of sugar. The other thing is sugar gives you a very similar dopamine hit, but at a lower level. And
Mm,
so you're almost weaning off that spiked level of dopamine because your body is suppressing it. It takes about 30 days for your dopamine and serotonin, which is mood regulation, to even out. And after 30 days, women have just these moments of joy that they haven't felt in years, just like walking into the office in the morning or seeing your kids play or, birds flying. I mean, it's weird. It feels like the world is in Technicolor, and it's almost just this really tender, transformative time. But here's the news. You could have been feeling this way the entire time. I mean,
I
that's what's
know.
crazy.
I know. That's totally crazy. So what I'm hearing is that you do need to be intentional. Like if you want to commit to going dry for 30 days or more, those first few weeks, and I mean, as someone who's gone through it and hearing you explain this, I'm like, yeah, you're so right. Like the sugar cravings, I used to say like, oh, well, my wine is my dessert. Because I actually didn't crave any dessert. I just wanted another glass of wine. And the sugar cravings and saying it's okay to eat. I
Yes.
like that.
Because
That's a really great tip.
women, one, we have been so conditioned to see food and sweets and sugar as good or bad. And women will say to me, I'm just trading one addiction for another. Like, this is worse because diet culture and all these things.
Mhm.
And you will not eat that much sugar for the rest of your life. You just won't. It is a temporary period of time where you don't want to white knuckle it. And you need to also separate out and be able to look at how alcohol is affecting your life specifically, your feelings, why you drink, um, separate from, oh my God, I'm starving and this salad sucks. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And for those listening today who are like, "Oh, I kind of like this idea. I mean, I know that I could benefit from it." Um, do you have resources available
Yes.
for someone who is like, give me a little bit more? Like, this is kind of like maybe this is their first time they've heard a podcast. Like, I don't talk about this a lot on my podcast, so my listeners might be new to this.
Yeah.
Like what resources do you maybe have? I know you said you have a podcast, of course, to support someone who is keen on this idea, not sure they can do it alone, is afraid of eating too much, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But like, well, how can you kind of support someone who's early in this journey?
Yeah. Well, on my website, which is hellosomedaycoaching.com, I have a completely free guide that you can sign up. It'll get sent to your inbox. It is 30 tips for your first month alcohol free. And it is comprehensive. It will tell you how you feel on day 1 and day 3, what to do on your first weekend, what to go to the grocery store and shop for, free resources to tap into. Like I said, podcasts and books. There is an entire category of books called Quit Lit. You know, we all talk about chick lit. It's Quit Lit. It's mostly written about women. I have another guide on my site, which is the best Quit Lit for women quitting drinking, and a
I
podcast
saw you
episode.
post about that and I was like, for the life of me, had no idea what you were talking about. I'm
I
like,
know.
what is Quitlet? I had no, and now that explains it. Thank you.
The New York Times actually interviewed me on an article of the best Quit Lit books for people who are looking to cut back on drinking or go alcohol free. And the fact that major media is covering this, and this was in late August, early September, is incredible to me because it is going mainstream. And I think one of the things that has shifted is women and people in general will not talk about this, right? Everyone will talk about the fact that they are doing a juice cleanse or doing XYZ or trying to cut back on sugar and failing. But no one talks about alcohol because we don't want to be seen as having a quote unquote drinking problem, right? There's so much stigma around it. And that is shifting. I mean, literally, the sober curious movement is real. There is no stigma around it. People are talking about it. So you can say, oh my God, I tried to cut back on alcohol, but Saturday night rolled around and I really wanted it, without being like, I think I have a drinking problem. Because you don't have to have a drinking problem for it to be difficult to cut back on a substance that is everywhere.
What would you say to someone who is like, yep, sold, want to do this, but they're worried about peer pressure from their friends? And I know this sounds so ridiculous and ludicrous as a
Oh,
40-something-year-old to say, but if you are someone who enjoys drinking and alcohol, wants to cut back, but your friend circle is like heavily influenced by that, they might even make fun of you or be like,
oh
oh,
yeah.
come on.
You're not
What do you
that
say to
bad. Just have one.
yeah. What? That's
Yeah.
so boring. Like, what
Yep.
would you say to that person who has that fear, that real fear?
Yeah. I would say present it in a very positive way as a health and wellness experience, because people will vibe off what you say. And if you say, oh, yeah, I'm deciding to take a break from drinking and see how I feel because I'm not sleeping well, or I'm feeling really anxious, or I realize I will exercise more if I'm not feeling kind of crappy from the night before, it's hard to be argue with that. Like, I feel less
Mm,
anxiety, or I was feeling a lot of anxiety, and be like, oh, come on, drink. I want you to
yeah,
feel
like who's gonna
anxiety.
push you to feel like crap? Like that's not a
The-
friend.
Yeah, the other thing to do is this is incredibly helpful, because a lot of times the pressure you will get is just have one, or just drink tonight, or come on, we're out. If you say, I'm doing X days without alcohol, I'm doing dry January, I'm doing a 100-day challenge, I'm doing a 30-day challenge. And by the way, I'm on day 15 of a 30-day challenge, or I'm on day 22 of a 100-day challenge. When someone's like, oh, come on, just have one, you're like, no, I'm not going to break my streak. Are you crazy?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I'm halfway there.
That's
And
like,
that
sorry,
helps
but
a lot.
that makes me think of Jerry Seinfeld. Have you ever heard this? Jerry Seinfeld said he had to write a joke a day, and he has a calendar and he puts a red X on the calendar. He's like, don't break the streak.
Yeah.
And for his like, I don't know how many decades, he writes a joke a day. He's like, that's how you get better, right? It's
Mhm.
that idea of like, don't break the streak. What if you break the streak?
Yeah.
What if you fall off the wagon after 1 week, 2 weeks? Are you done? Should you just throw in the towel? Like, what do
No,
you do?
no, absolutely not. I mean, I think that this is hard. And if you stumble, that is completely okay. The worst thing that people do is really judge themselves about it. I highly encourage you to keep the streak going, because we all do the thing where we say we're not going to drink and I'll just start again on Monday, and that can continue forever. Plus, you never get to the good part, right? You are always in this craving withdrawal cycle. You never get the noise to go away from your head. But say you said you were going to do dry January, and on day 14, you're like, oh, screw it, I'm going to drink. Just start again the next day. And I also like the idea of saying, oh my gosh, I didn't drink 28 of the last 31 days. That is incredible, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And that was something that I really worked on last time. I'm like, okay, so I had a drink on January 29th. That's okay. It doesn't mean I'm a drinker again. And then
Yeah.
I was back on the wagon, and it was reassuring to know that if you do break the streak, it's not all gone. You haven't lost it. It's not all to hell in a handbag.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've done this. Let's keep going. I love this
Absolutely.
conversation. I could talk about this all day. I'm really excited to see, of the listeners today, whoever's listening, I'd love for you guys to just send me a DM and let me know from listening to this podcast, who wants to do dry January? Are you already planning on it? Are you doing it? And maybe I'll do it with you. Maybe I'll do a year. That's my next thing is I want to go a year. I've done five
Good.
months. If I can do 5 months, I can go 365 days.
And you will be so proud of yourself. You truly will. You'll go through every event, every season, and you'll be able to compare, like, what was my vacation like drinking versus not drinking? I had a client, and I know we have to wrap up. I had a client who went to Hawaii, you know, always drank in Hawaii. She went with a girlfriend. She did everything great to prepare. She had her mindset right. She had told her friend she wasn't drinking, all the things. So they went out to a dinner. She didn't drink. At dinner, she was like wanting that alcoholic cocktail. It felt more
Mai
special.
Tai.
Yeah, but she didn't. And she and her friend had three. The next morning, they were planning on going on this incredible sunrise hike. Her friend didn't go. Oh, I don't know. I'll just hang by the pool. She went, said it was the most incredible experience of her life. And she was like, I would have missed that for my time,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's super powerful. I mean, that's what I think about every time when I wake up in the morning and I haven't had a drink. That's when I'm so proud of myself and I feel so good because I feel like the world is my oyster. I can
Yeah.
freaking climb any mountain. I can do anything. Oh, this has been such a great conversation, Casey. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. I'm really excited to follow your podcast. I want to start listening to your podcast. Maybe you'll
Yay.
inspire me to get back in that on that path. Because it has been a journey for me. And I'll
Mhm.
probably end up, guys, if you're listening, I'll probably do a separate episode and share a little bit more of my experience. I just feel like I'm in the messy middle still, and I'm not really prepared to share that.
Yeah.
Unless people are really interested, I'd be happy to do that. But I'm excited to explore this further. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before we sign off, do you have one last nugget of wisdom that you can share with our listeners today?
Yeah. I would say tap into resources, right? If you were going to run a 10K, a marathon, you would not just decide to run. You would probably join a couch to 5K or 10K group. You would map out a running schedule. You would enlist the help of your partner to maybe pick you up after a long run or take the kids on a Saturday morning. So tap into resources. This is something that you require support of. And so I encourage you to go to my website, download the free guide, the same way you would print out okay, what's my running schedule for a couch to 5K, and listen to my podcast, listen to other podcasts. They're really amazing. Some of my very, very good friends have a podcast called Sober Powered that's all about the science of drinking, how it affects you. Another one is Sober Mom Life. She's fantastic. And of course, mine, Hello Someday podcast for sober, curious women.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much, Casey. And other than that, is there anywhere else that they can find and follow you?
Yeah.
That's it,
Um,
right?
yeah. On Instagram, I'm at Casey M. My middle name's McGuire Davidson. So that is where you'll find me.
Amazing. Our designers are usually very active on Instagram. So
Of course they are. Yeah, I
that's where they
am
like to go.
there.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so, so much for joining me today. I'm wishing you a very enjoyable sober January.
Yes. And I hope you start with January. It's fantastic and it's a great time to do it.
Totally. I will keep you posted.
Okay, definitely do.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Casey. I love that there's so many people talking about this now. It's becoming so much more mainstream. And I love that there's like no judgment. And one of the big takeaways and what I heard from Casey is that I think women, especially parents, do struggle with cutting back the alcohol because it feels like that's for them. And I love that comparison when Casey talks about, you can do a glass of wine while you're doing just about anything. So it feels like you're kind of doing something for you while you're putting the kids to bed and while you're playing Lego and while you're playing, Keys to the Castle. And I can relate to that. And what I've seen, at least in my own life and with other women that I've spoken to, is that I just don't do enough other things that bring me joy. Like I'm being more intentional for sure about that. But this idea that alcohol is filling that void. And if you remove it, what else can take its place? Anyhow, I think it's a really great conversation. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know. Definitely reach out to Casey. Let her know you heard her on this podcast if you want to sort of take this to the next level. And let me know if you're doing dry January and we will powwow. Lots of exciting content coming in the months ahead. So stay tuned, stay up to date with this podcast. We've got some really exciting things happening in January. All right. See you soon.